What if, Tensura, Melting the Eternal Frost Part 10 author, JackDaWeb on Wattpad. This story depicts an alternate timeline wherein Velzard attends Walpurgis after sensing Veldora's presence. She subsequently meets our protagonist and becomes interested in him after his display at the meeting. After thinking for a bit, she decides to move to Tempest and becomes a close ally of Rimuru. Rimuru and Velzard will sometimes be out of character, OOC, as it is unavoidable for this premise. Rimuru, our protagonist, will be more rational and have an actual spine. Velzard, she will not be as cold and ruthless as her canon counterpart. Since Velzard is missing significant characterization in the early parts of the series, the author decided to write his own interpretation of her personality based on the original light novel. I recommend at least having seen the second season of the anime, since the story picks up from that point. This fanfiction will follow the main story beats from the original light novel, though some arcs will be glossed over if there are very few changes to the canon events. Chapter 25 Dragon of Eternal Frost. Rimuru's Pav Sai. Diablo really showed himself, huh? Well, I suppose everything is in order now that Blanc, or rather, Testarossa, has officially joined my side. Given that these two are acquainted, I have a feeling they're about to have a rather interesting reunion. Diablo stepped out from the shadows with a soft chuckle, commanding the air around us. He walked toward Testarossa and me, his steps measured, and stopped a few meters away from us. En Noir? Testarossa stammered, her eyes wide with disbelief. Her shock was unmistakable. While Diablo's appearance wasn't strictly necessary, his presence certainly added weight to the situation. It helped solidify my claim over Testarossa. Kufufu. Indeed, it is I, Diablo said with his usual smug grin. However, just like you, I have been granted a beautiful name by Rimuru-sama. So, you must call me Diablo from now on, he informed her. Testarossa took a deep breath and regained her composure, a calm smile replacing her earlier shock. Surprisingly, she didn't seem rattled by the fact that I had granted Diablo a name. Then again, someone as sharp as her probably expected it. And you are to refer to me as Testarossa from now on, she said, her tone calm but direct. It's a surprise to see you here, she admitted. Of course, Diablo responded, his voice tinged with pride. After all, I placed myself in service to the great Rimuru during his awakening, he explained. Testarossa's eyes widened for a fraction of a second before returning to normal, her expression thoughtful. Then it seems we now serve the same master, she said, a hint of resolve in her voice. Difficult as it may be, we must put aside our hostility for each other, she added. Diablo's smile softened just slightly, a rare moment of agreement. Indeed, I'm glad we can agree on this one, Testarossa, he replied. Looks like they're going to get along just fine. I had already decided Diablo would be the one to show Testarossa around Tempest. Besides that, he'd also be briefing her on her new role as the ambassador of my nation. From what I'd seen so far, her talents were impressive. All right, everyone, I said, feeling the need to wrap things up. Now that everyone's acquainted, why don't we exit this cave? Diablo, I want you to show Testarossa around Tempest, I told him. Understood, Rimuru-sama, Diablo responded with a bow, his tone respectful. Satisfied, I led the way as we started walking toward the exit. The area where I'd performed the summoning ritual was deep within the cave, so the walk would take a while. We could have teleported, of course, but I preferred to take it slow this time. Nothing much happened during our trek, that is, until a few minutes later, when I noticed Testarossa's expression shift. She looked curious, as if deep in thought. I was interested to know why her demeanor had suddenly changed, so I decided to break the silence. Is something on your mind, Testarossa? I asked, tilting my head slightly. The sound of my voice seemed to snap her back to reality. She looked at me, a slight blush creeping onto her cheeks as she seemed embarrassed by her lapse in focus. Pardon me, Rimuru-sama, she began, her voice soft and slightly meek. But I've had a question brewing for quite some time now, she continued. Ask away, I encouraged her, genuinely curious. Her eyes flickered for a moment before she continued, her voice laced with careful thought. Forgive me if this sounds rude, but did you decide to summon me on a whim? Or was it through someone's suggestion, she asked, looking at me expectantly. Should I tell her? Then again, she was going to meet Velzard sooner or later, so I might as well give her a few clues now. Let's just say, I began, choosing my words carefully. I needed a demon with a particular skill set, and someone happened to suggest you, I answered, keeping my words vague. Testarossa's curiosity was piqued. She immediately turned to Diablo, clearly suspecting he was the one I referred to. However, Diablo only chuckled, shaking his head as he denied her assumption. And no, it wasn't Diablo, I clarified. Though, he did provide me with some valuable information about you, which solidified my decision to choose you, I added. I see, Testarossa replied, her curiosity still burning but her expression thoughtful. You'll meet that person soon enough, I added, offering her a cryptic hint. She simply nodded, satisfied for now. We continued walking in silence for a while, the soft sound of our footsteps the only thing breaking the otherwise peaceful atmosphere. Soon, we arrived at the upper chamber of the sealed cave. The scene that greeted us was serene, almost calming. In the center of the spacious chasm, Velzard floated effortlessly, meditating. Chunks of rock and ice circled her in a controlled orbit, defying gravity as she remained completely still, her expression serene and collected. It was a beautiful sight. Sorry to keep you waiting, I called out, breaking the silence. My voice echoed softly through the cavern, catching Velzard's attention. Her eyes fluttered open, and a warm smile spread across her face as she acknowledged us. Foo, Tilda, don't worry about it, she replied, her tone light and welcoming. As Velzard's gaze shifted toward Testarossa, her smile grew. She landed gracefully, the floating debris around her falling gently to the ground. We closed the distance between us, and as we approached, I could see Testarossa's reaction was a mild surprise that quickly settled into a neutral expression. I believe this is our first time meeting, Blanc, Velzard said, her voice carrying an amused lilt. Though, I'm sure Rimuru-kun has already given you a wonderful name, hasn't he? She surmised. Yes, he has. I now go by Testarossa, she responded smoothly, her eyes flickering with recognition. And I believe you are the Frost Dragon, are you not? She asked. Testarossa's sharpness was on full display. Then again, Velzard wasn't exactly hiding her true identity, and the primordials would be able to recognize the true dragons with ease. Indeed I am. It's nice to meet you, Testarossa, Velzard greeted warmly. It is an honor, Velzard-sama, Testarossa replied, bowing in respect. Your surprise earlier was rather amusing, Velzard teased with a playful smile. Pardon me, Velzard-sama, but I certainly hadn't expected to encounter a true dragon right after my incarnation. I assume you were the one who suggested my summoning to Rimuru-sama? Testarossa surmised, her eyes searching Velzard's. Velzard nodded in confirmation, her smile not fading. Don't worry about it, she's with me. To keep it short, I needed someone to fulfill the role of ambassador for Tempest. As a demon lord, I couldn't simply stroll around carelessly for mundane meetings. Politics was never my strong suit. Diablo could have handled it, but he has too many other responsibilities. So, when I asked if another demon could fit the role, Velz-chan suggested you, I explained casually, though I couldn't hide the hint of fondness I felt for Velzard's support. Diablo chuckled lightly, and Testarossa glanced at him with an amused yet mildly annoyed look. She quickly recomposed herself, returning to me with a warm smile, her aura now exuding the confidence of someone who fully embraced her new role. With a slight bow, she placed her hand over her chest. Rest assured, Rimuru-sama. You've made the right decision by choosing me as your ambassador. With the power you've granted me and my expertise in politics, I will ensure Tempest's image is beyond reproach. No nation will dare underestimate yours, Testarossa proclaimed with unwavering confidence, her tone absolute. Velzard and I exchanged a glance, both nodding in approval. Her attitude was a strong indicator that she would excel in her role as Tempest's ambassador. We look forward to your performance, Testarossa, Velzard said, her tone calm but sincere. Once the introductions were out of the way, I warped us from the sealed cave to the city plaza. Testarossa remained unfazed by the sudden teleportation, which was good. I had grown used to people getting disoriented whenever I used to warp, but it was always a bit awkward. What? It's too tiring to warn people beforehand. We stood in the middle of the bustling city square, the citizens continuing their daily routines around us. Now was the perfect time for Diablo to give Testarossa a tour of Tempest, as it was still relatively early. Yuki and his group should arrive soon, so I planned to meet them at the entrance. Diablo, I'd like you to show Testarossa around Tempest. Once you're done, brief her on her role and responsibilities. I'll introduce her formally to the others after the expedition, I requested, my tone matter of fact. It shall be done, Rimuru-sama, Diablo responded with a bow, and I gave a quick nod of approval. After they departed, Velzard and I were left alone, standing together in the plaza. Velz-chan, I'll meet you at the agreed location once I speak with Yuki, I told her, my voice warm but to the point. Very well, Rimu-kun, she responded softly, smiling at me before waving. I waved back before she warped away, leaving me to head toward the city's entrance. Yuki likely planned for me to accompany him to JackDaWeb by wagon, which would take a few weeks to get there. However, I had other plans. That route would take too long for me, and besides, I wanted to try a new method of travel. If this expedition is indeed a trap for me, Yuki's going to have an unpleasant realization waiting for him. Soon, I reached the entrance. As expected, Yuki and his crew were already there, along with Gobta, Shion, and Sue, who had also been waiting for me. Yo! Glad to see you three are ready, I called out, my voice lighthearted. They all immediately took notice. Rimuru-sama, Shion yelled, her voice far too enthusiastic for comfort. Good grief. I was starting to regret bringing Shion along for this expedition. If a fight breaks out during the journey, she might just end up killing everyone before we even get started. Sue gave a simple bow, his ever-calm demeanor standing in stark contrast to Shion's exuberance. Gobta, on the other hand, seemed overly excited for the adventure ahead, though I couldn't help but feel like he was underestimating the dangers ahead. It's good to see you back, Rimuru-sama, Sue greeted calmly. I stood with the group for a moment, waiting for Yuki. It didn't take long before I saw him walking toward us from the corner of my eye. Rimuru-san, I take it you're ready for this expedition? Yuki asked cheerfully, his tone hard to read. It was difficult to tell whether he was being sincere or if this was just another part of his polished facade. My suspicions made it hard to take him at face value, but for now, I had no choice but to maintain a friendly attitude toward him. Until I had concrete evidence that he was responsible for the recent troubles in Tempest, I had no reason to confront him. Will there be enough space for 3 more people in your wagons? I asked, gesturing toward the group behind me. He nodded enthusiastically, though there was a slight hesitation in his expression. Yup, but wait. He paused and tilted his head to the side as though counting. The slight confusion that crossed his face after he counted the people made it obvious he wasn't quite expecting this. Aren't there 4 of you going? He asked innocently, the confusion in his voice evident. Correct. Gobta, Shion, and Sue will accompany you. However, I plan to experiment with a new form of travel, so I'll be going on my own, I explained, my tone casual, though my voice had a hint of amusement. Don't tell me you plan on teleporting ahead of us. Ha ha ha. I can totally see you doing that, you know, he joked, his tone light but still carrying that hint of forced cheer. Hey, not at all. Plus, I'd like to enjoy the journey. Teleporting would defeat the purpose, I replied, a smirk tugging at the corner of my lips. Truthfully, I just wanted to try that new method of travel Velzard had suggested. It was an idea I couldn't pass up. I see. Are you absolutely sure you don't want to go with us? He asked, his voice laced with that persistent, nagging tone. Man, this guy really won't let up. It's almost annoying how hard he's trying to keep up this innocent act. But I managed to bite back my irritation, keeping my face neutral. Yup, don't worry about me, Yuki-san. I know where JackDaWeb is, I said, forcing a light-hearted tone. Yuki sighed dramatically, a look of defeat flashing across his face. Well, if you insist. Are your subordinates going to be okay with us? He asked, still trying to gather more details as if he hadn't already been told. Really? Is he still trying to make sure? My decision's made, and he's just dragging it out at this point. My priorities are set, and I'm not about to change them now. They'll be fine, I assured him, glancing back at my subordinates. The 3 nodded in unison, with Shion giving a confident thumbs up. I turned back to Yuki, feeling a bit of amusement at the sight of his face slowly transforming from concern to relief. If you guys encounter any trouble on your journey, they should be more than enough to keep the group safe, I added. All right, then. Yuki brightened up, his demeanor shifting almost instantly. Want a race to see who gets to JackDaWeb first, Rimuru-san? He flashed a cheeky grin, clearly enjoying himself. I let out a small sigh, unsure whether he was playing up this kid persona for me or if he was genuinely being this carefree. It's a bit hard to tell with him, considering the odd mix of sincerity and playful mischief he exudes. But whatever the case, I knew I wouldn't lose any race today. Even if I don't teleport, I'll still get there faster than you, I said, a chuckle escaping me. HMPH. You're no fun, he muttered, pouting. I couldn't believe my eyes. Did Yuki really just pout at me? It was a ridiculous sight, and the absurdity of it had me snickering a bit. Well, I'm not going to hold you up any longer. I'll see you all there. Take care, Gobta, Xian, Sue, and everyone else. I waved at them, my voice light but firm. Take care, Rimuru-sama. Xian's voice rang out enthusiastically. I waved back at my crew before turning to head off. As I walked away, I couldn't help but feel a little more confident about what was to come. There was no way this expedition was going to go as Yuki expected. But for now, I had other plans to attend to. Once I was far enough away, I teleported quickly, popping up near Velzard's location. I stood at the edge of a large open plains field outside the city. To my surprise, Veldora was there, too, and the two siblings were deep in conversation. They turned toward me as I approached. Well, how did it go, Rimu-kun? Velzard asked, her tone curious. I assumed she meant my meeting with Yuki. He was incredibly persistent about wanting me to go with him. But I managed to convince him I'd be going alone, I explained, shrugging lightly. Fu tilde that's good, Velzard replied with a small, amused smile. Curious, I turned toward Veldora, who was grinning ear to ear, looking like a kid about to see something exciting. What's got you so worked up, Veldora? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Veldora's grin widened as he placed his hands on his hips, clearly enjoying the moment. Kuahahaha, I want to see it too, you know? Besides, are you sure you can contain the burst of aura yourself? Veldora's voice was filled with playful challenge. Wait, he's never seen it before? Really? I thought for sure he had, but then again, he did mention never being able to push Velzard seriously before. It made sense, but it was still surprising. Now that you mention it, I don't think I could handle it alone. Hey, my bad, I admitted with a sheepish chuckle. Don't worry about it, Rimuru, Veldora said. Now, let's get to it, he continued. Turning to his sister for approval, Velzard nodded. I followed Veldora as he stepped back. We moved until we were about 300 meters away from her, which was plenty of distance but not too far. Is this far enough? I called out. Velzard nodded. I glanced over at Veldora. Ready? I asked. Veldora affirmed. We clasped hands together, and a shimmering barrier with a 700-meter diameter sprang up around us. It wasn't a battle, but we still needed to ensure the energy about to be released didn't cause any damage. I recalled the first time Veldora had transformed and released his aura. His mere presence had shaken the 100th floor of the labyrinth and nearly thrown us off our feet. It had been immense, a terrifying yet awe-inspiring display of power, truly befitting a true dragon. Now, we were about to witness that same power again, but on an even grander scale. Velzard's control over her aura was unparalleled, a feat that set her apart from her siblings. It was so perfect, so refined, that she could remain cloaked in her human form, emitting almost no aura at all. The contrast was striking. Whereas Veldora's power roared like a storm, Velzard's presence felt like the calm before a cataclysm. On the other hand, I kept my aura in check by shoving it into the imaginary space of Azathoth, an endless expanse where it could dissipate without consequence. But that wasn't an option for those without a subspace of their own, and Velzard, despite her immense power, was no exception. Not long ago, I asked her if she had experienced the same struggle as Veldora in containing her overwhelming aura and letting it simmer beneath the surface. But Velzard, with her superior control, had no such issue. While she occasionally mentioned the urge to release it, she had refrained, knowing the consequences of unleashing that much power. But today, she would change that. Today, Velzard would transform into her dragon form. It would be the first time Veldora and I had ever seen it, and the anticipation hung heavy in the air. It was the proposition she had made to me. She would become her dragon form, and I would ride on her to Jistav. The idea was far too thrilling to turn down, so I accepted without hesitation. Veldora would stand by to contain the initial burst of aura upon her transformation. After that, the rest would be up to me. With a shared glance, Veldora and I signaled Velzard. She nodded once, confirming her readiness, and then, in a single motion, she began. A wave of power surged from her, so overwhelming that Veldora and I were pushed back a few meters. Our feet dug into the ground as if the earth beneath us resisted the force. The air around us grew unnaturally cold, as if heat itself had been banished from this place. Snow began to swirl in every direction, coating the ground and the barrier in an icy blanket. Even with natural elements nullification, we could feel the chill sinking into our bones, seeping into our very souls. Velzard's body began to glow with a soft, ethereal light. It was a pale blue radiance that intensified with each passing second. The glow swallowed her form until she was little more than a silhouette of pure light. The intensity of it was blinding, making it almost impossible to look directly at her. And then, with a sudden, mesmerizing shift, her figure began to grow. The shape of a majestic dragon began to take form, coalescing from the radiant blue light. It didn't take long for the transformation to complete. The blinding glow faded, revealing Velzard's true form, and the very ground seemed to quake beneath her. Her landing was so forceful that it felt like the earth had been struck by a colossal force, reverberating with the weight of her divinity. She was a being of pure power, a force of nature incarnate. My expectations had been high, but nothing could have prepared me for what I was witnessing. Velzard's dragon form stood an awe-inspiring 80 meters tall, her immense form stretching over 200 meters in length. She was a living embodiment of an avalanche, a tidal wave of power and divinity. Her wings, vast and commanding, spanned a staggering 400 meters, each movement causing the air to ripple with the force of a storm. The wings were a terrifying beauty. They were majestic yet deadly, covered in leathery scales etched with veins of ice that crackled and hissed with the frigid air. The dark blue underbelly, stark against the lighter tones of her body, ran from her broad chest down to the base of her tail, giving her an almost armored appearance. Jagged icicle-like spikes ran down her spine and tail, their surfaces gleaming with a deadly cold sheen. Each spike seemed to hum with latent energy as if it could pierce the air itself, radiating a sharp, menacing aura that could freeze anything in its path. The ridge of spikes tapered off near the end of her tail, giving her a predatory elegance that was as terrifying as it was beautiful. But what struck me most was the intricate armor that protected her skull. A golden yellow shell curved protectively over her forehead, framing a wild mane of light blue hair. The hair flowed back in thick, frozen strands, shimmering like frost in the cold air. Her eyes, those fierce, glowing yellow orbs, burned with an intense, almost unearthly fire, their gaze unyielding and full of ancient wisdom. And her fangs, red, sharp, and wicked, jutting from her maw like bloodied blades, stood in stark contrast to the icy blue of her form. Veldora and I stood there in stunned silence, our gazes fixed on Velzard's magnificent form. The sheer scale of her dragon form left us in awe, and I was so overwhelmed that I didn't even think to check the barrier's stability. The thought never even crossed my mind. It was as if the world around us had paused for a moment to witness her transformation. Seconds passed before Velzard took the first step toward us. The ground beneath her trembled lightly with each movement, the earth responding to the weight of her divine presence. "Are you two all right?" Velzard's voice rang out, smooth and melodic, though it didn't move her massive jaw. The power behind her words reverberated through the air, causing the atmosphere to shiver. It was enough to pull me from my stupor, and I found myself gazing upward, having to crane my neck just to meet her eyes. "Your dragon form looks amazing, Velz-chan," I shouted, my voice full of uncontainable excitement. She chuckled softly, the sound as delicate as a breeze yet full of pride. "Thank you, Rimuru-kun," she replied, her voice warm with affection. "Oh, how long has it been since I last transformed into this form? You two did an excellent job containing my aura." Her words were a compliment, but they felt like a sweet acknowledgement, and I couldn't help but grin. "So this is your dragon form, Velzard ne?" "As expected. It's majestic." Veldora's booming voice echoed from beside us, his tone filled with admiration. "Of course it would be." Velzard's response was prideful yet carried a playful note, as if her beauty and power were simply facts of nature. Now that her transformation was complete, the overwhelming aura that had once surged like a tidal wave had settled into a stable, controlled radiance. Veldora and I released the barrier that had surrounded us, and I swiftly replaced it with a smaller, more refined one to conceal Velzard's presence. It would shield us from any unwanted attention as we flew toward our destination, keeping our movements undetected. Well then, Velzard said with a playful lilt to her voice. Why don't you hop on, Rimuru-kun? Her words were inviting, and the thrill of what was about to happen made my heart race. Grinning widely, I nodded, unable to contain my excitement. Without hesitation, I leapt into the air, landing between her massive wings on her back. Despite the cold, jagged spikes of ice decorating her body, it was surprisingly comfortable to be there, the texture of her scales frigid beneath me. I leaned against one of the ice spikes protruding from her back. It was icy to the touch, but I didn't mind in the slightest. Hey, I'm really going to ride a dragon. This was every child's dream, and now it was finally coming true. Are you comfortable, Rimuru-kun? Velzard's voice broke through my thoughts, and I looked up to find her watching me with a quiet smile. Yup, I'm ready to go whenever you are. My words came out with a burst of energy, a clear reflection of my excitement. I glanced down to see Veldora waving at us from a distance, and I waved back enthusiastically. Veldora, thanks for your help today. Keep protecting the city and stay on top of things in the labyrinth. I called down to him, giving him a thumbs up. No problem, Rimuru. Veldora's laugh boomed in the air, his voice full of mirth. Stay safe. With that, he gave us a final wave, and I gave him an approving nod. With that, Veldora teleported away, leaving us in the quiet, open space. Velzard shifted her weight, adjusting her stance, ready for flight. Shall we? She asked, her tone soft, but there was an undeniable excitement in her voice. I responded quickly, eager to take to the skies. I barely had time to brace myself before she moved. With a single, bone-rattling flap of her colossal wings, we exploded into the air. Due to the sheer force of her takeoff, a massive crater was carved into the ground. 1 second, we were on land, and in the next, we shot up so fast that everything below blurred into a mess of colors. My stomach lurched, and I held on to the spike behind me. The sheer power behind her wings was terrifying. It was like being strapped to a living hurricane. As we rose, she leveled off and began to hover, her wings beating steadily like the rhythmic crash of waves. Each downstroke sent a burst of cold air swirling around us, but it wasn't frantic or wild. Instead, it was controlled, almost graceful. Her body was so massive, but she moved through the sky with this weird sense of ease, like gravity was just an afterthought to her. Tilda, how was that, Rimuru-kun? Velzard asked teasingly. I readjusted myself before answering her. Frightening, but also incredible, I shouted. The winds were powerful this high up. It was to the point I could hardly hear myself. But the most deafening sound was the flapping of Velzard's wings. Well, do you want to head straight to JackDaWeb? Or do you want to explore for a little while? She questioned. It would be nice to explore this world properly, especially while I'm riding on a damn dragon. Judging from how fast she moved, I estimate we'd arrive at our destination in minutes. Since we had plenty of time, I wanted to explore the world with her. I'd like you to show me around, Velz-chan. After all, we have plenty of time on our hands, I told her, and she bellowed in satisfaction. All right then, she replied. Velzard turned in the air, slowly at first, tilting her massive head and shifting her weight. I felt her wings pivot slightly, adjusting to catch the wind. It was like riding a mountain that suddenly decided it could fly. Beneath me, her massive frame shifted as she angled her body, lining up with our destination. Curious, I looked down at the world beneath us, only to see it was nothing more than a speck now. If I had to guess, we were probably a few kilometers in the sky. Why don't we visit Milim's domain, shall we? She suggested. Sure, I've never been before. I'm curious to see how it looks, I replied. Very well, she said. And then, without any warning, she dashed forth. The sudden acceleration was like free-falling from the top of a cliff, only way faster. She angled her wings back, and before I could even register what was happening, we were tearing through the sky, blitzing forward many times faster than sound. The wind howled past us, freezing, sharp, almost angry as it screamed by. Despite her massive size, she shot forward like an arrow, slicing through the air with frightening speed. Everything around us blurred again, the landscape turning into long streaks of white and blue as we hurtled forward, and all I could do was hold on tighter. My hair felt like it was about to be ripped from my head by the winds dragging it. But I didn't care. I was elated. Holy shit, This is amazing, I shouted at the top of my lungs. The winds practically buried my face, making speaking normally difficult. I could have used telepathy with Velzard, but I decided to let my inner kid out for once. Tilda? Are you alright, Rimuru-kun? She asked. I'm alright. Though, will you fly at this speed for the entire journey? At this rate, we'll reach Milim's domain in no time. I kind of want to admire the scenery, I spoke as loud as I could. Luckily, she heard me. No worries. I'm almost done, she assured me. After a few heart-pounding seconds, I felt her slow down. She didn't slow down by a lot, but just enough to keep things manageable. Her wings adjusted, no longer pumping with explosive force but settling into a steady, powerful rhythm. She reached her cruising speed. And just like that, everything seemed to stabilize. The wind stopped clawing at my face, and I could actually catch my breath again. I sat up a little, loosening my death grip on her spike, and finally decided to look out at the world below. What I saw made my eyes widen in pure amazement. We were so high up that the mountains looked like jagged little cracks in the earth, their snow-capped peaks sparkling in the distance. Massive forests stretched out below us, endless seas of green swaying in the wind, but from up here, they looked like patches of moss on a giant stone. Rivers wound through the land like silver threads. I could make out the tiny specks of cities far below. Entire nations and kingdoms appeared so small that they barely seemed real. It was like looking down at a living map, a tapestry of life that spanned as far as my eyes could see. And we were moving fast, frighteningly fast. The landscape blurred beneath us, yet I could still make out the details and take in the vastness of it all. We zipped past mountain ranges that would have taken days to cross by foot. Forests that stretched on for hundreds of kilometers were nothing more than dark green blurs as we soared over them, shadows chasing us across the land. It was humbling, honestly. While I've flown vast distances before, I never flew this high up nor this fast. This sight was something else entirely. From up here, I got to see how small everything was. Velzard made it look so easy, almost as if flying at this speed was the most natural thing in the world. Every beat of her wings was smooth, unhurried, like she had all the time in the world to reach our destination, even though we covered ground that would take weeks to traverse on foot. I couldn't help but feel a surge of awe, maybe even a bit of pride. Riding on her back and watching the world blur by beneath us made me feel untouchable. Like the sky was ours, and nothing could catch us. I was so caught up in the view that time just slipped away. It was impossible not to be absorbed by it. The way the world seemed to stretch endlessly below us, with its patchwork of forests, rivers, and mountains all fading into the horizon, was breathtaking. It was like the world had opened up just for us, a quiet, stunning display of beauty that no one else would ever witness. I could have stayed like that for hours, just watching the land shift and change beneath us, feeling her wings beating in a steady rhythm, like the pulse of the sky itself. But then I noticed the air had shifted slightly. Did you enjoy the scenery, Rimuru-kun? Velzard suddenly asked. What did she mean? I thought it's only been a few seconds. Are we almost there? I asked loudly in return. Indeed. It has been several minutes since we began our flight. We're nearly there, she answered. What? I blinked profusely, snapping out of my trance, and looked ahead. Sure enough, our destination was looming ahead of us. Milim's domain was an enormous mountain that had been turned into the home of the dragon faithful. The massive structure stood proud in the distance, its silhouette unmistakable. That's when it hit me. We'd been flying for longer than I realized. Without me noticing, minutes had flown by in a flash. Velzard had covered so much ground so effortlessly that I'd completely lost track of time. We were almost there, but it felt like we had only just started. A little disappointed, I braced myself for impact. However, it never arrived. Instead, she slowed, her massive wings beating in a steady manner as we hovered, suspended above the ground. I was momentarily confused until I saw a bright pink light approaching us at incredible speed. It was Milim. She came to a halt and floated a few tens of meters away from us. Contrary to my expectations, her face wore a cheeky grin. I thought she'd be surprised at our sudden visit. Wahahaha. You thought I wouldn't sense your presence because you concealed your aura? Nothing can hide from my eyes, Rimuru, Auntie, Milim exclaimed. Unsurprisingly, Milim managed to detect us despite me concealing Velzard's aura. Still, I'm confused about why she's not questioning our arrival. Fufufu tilde hello, Milim-chan. I hope you don't mind our sudden visit. Chapter 26 Surprise Arrival Yuki's POV. It's safe to say that Rimuru is growing suspicious of me. He's no longer as outwardly friendly and carefree when he's around me. Instead of our usual easy conversations, he seems more distant and nonchalant, as if he's subtly trying to cut our interactions short. I noticed he's been less engaged recently, as if he's thinking 2 steps ahead, watching me without showing his hand. Sigh. How did Rimuru gain so much power and influence in such a short time? It still baffles me. 1 minute, he was just another powerful entity in the world, but now, it's as if the entire ecosystem bends to his will. I've spent years meticulously building up my resources, allies, and knowledge, but Rimuru? His ascent has been nothing short of meteoric. Regardless, now isn't the time to dwell on that. I pushed those thoughts aside and focused on the present. I approached the carriages with Rimuru's subordinates trailing behind. They'd been assigned to accompany me on this 2-week journey, a precaution I couldn't argue with, but also one that was less than ideal. Those 3 were strong, highly capable, and unquestionably loyal to Rimuru. They would undoubtedly be watching me for any sign of misstep. We would share the same wagon, and getting through this without tension was critical. The last thing I wanted was a confrontation in close quarters. Kigali was already waiting at the carriage, a reassuring presence at my side. Her sharp gaze briefly flicked to the trio behind me but remained composed. She knew how delicate this situation was and could manage her emotions even when the pressure peaked. "Right this way, Yuki-sama," she said, gesturing toward the wagon with a calm, professional tone that gave nothing away. She played the role of my loyal secretary well, but I knew she was more than that. In my goal to achieve world domination, she was my closest ally. The 4 of us climbed into the wagon, the subordinates taking their seats across from us, maintaining their neutral but watchful expressions. I settled next to Kigali, her quiet presence reminding me that, despite the tension, I wasn't alone in this. As the coachman cracked the reins, the wagon jolted forward, beginning our long journey. For the first few minutes, there was only the creak of the carriage and the steady rhythm of the horse's hooves. The silence inside the cabin was thick but not uncomfortable. It was more like the calm before the storm. I could feel their eyes on me, assessing and calculating. They hadn't been hostile yet, but I knew it wouldn't take much to shift the atmosphere. This 2-week journey would be a test, stuck in a small wagon with Rimuru's trusted subordinates watching my every move. If I could get through this without incident, I might just buy myself the time I need. But one misstep, one spark, and things could spiral quickly. As time passed, I noticed a subtle shift in the air. Rimuru's subordinates, who'd been watchful from the moment we stepped into the wagon, relaxed slightly. Their postures eased, their guarded expressions softened, and the air of suspicion around them seemed to dissipate. Maybe they realized that there wasn't much of a threat in such close quarters, or perhaps the slow, steady rhythm of the carriage was lulling them into a sense of calm. It was an opportunity. If they were starting to relax, now might be the best time to start a conversation. Nothing too intense, just something to build rapport with and take the edge off. I couldn't afford to have them on guard the entire trip. Slowly, I leaned forward, a casual smile on my face, and decided to break the silence. I must say, the founding festival was an incredibly stellar event I never could have imagined happening. I began, my tone full of admiration as I praised the monumental event. It might sound like I'm buttering them up, but the truth is, it was a remarkable achievement. I would have laughed if someone had told me a few years ago that there would be a grand celebration where humans and monsters would gather harmoniously to honor a demon lord's ascension. The idea seemed absurd. Monsters and humans together, not in conflict, but in celebration? It defied everything I thought I knew about this world. Yet, not only did it happen, but it was also an undeniable success. The festival brought Tempest and Rimuru into the spotlight, and I do not doubt it left a lasting impression on the Western nations. Rimuru, the once unassuming slime, now a demon lord, had shown the world that peace between monsters and humans wasn't just possible. It could be celebrated. Across from me, I saw Xian's eyes light up at my words. Her face practically beamed with pride. It wasn't surprising, considering how fiercely loyal they were to Rimuru. But Xian? She seemed to take her devotion to another level. She's more of a fanatic, if I'm being honest. It is to be expected of Rimuru-sama. The founding festival was meticulously planned, after all, she exclaimed, her voice filled with admiration. The other 2 nodded in agreement, seemingly sharing her sense of pride. He, indeed. But the event was of such a grand scale it seemed impossible to pull off. I chuckled softly, responding with a bit of humility. Shion puffed out her chest, full of conviction. HMPH. If Rimuru-sama wishes for it, then it shall happen. Her voice rang with absolute certainty. It sounded like an exaggeration, but knowing what I know now, I couldn't really argue. Rimuru had a way of making the impossible happen time and time again. Sue, the other Oni, scoffed slightly, not at me, but at Shion's exuberance. While I don't like agreeing with her, Rimuru-sama has a knack for pulling off impossible acts. This festival was just another example of such, he said, his voice as cool as ever. Sue seemed like the type who only spoke up if he had something important to add, meaning his words held weight. His quiet confidence perfectly contrasted with Shion's fiery nature. Not to mention, everyone put their best foot forward to make this event successful. It was tough but incredibly worth it in the end. Gobta, the last of the trio, chimed in. His usual cheerful energy shone through as he spoke, and I could tell he took pride in the role everyone played. I would bet. By the way, I saw your fights in the tournament, Gobta. You did incredible. I praised him earnestly, letting my admiration show. His performance during the fighting tournament genuinely took me by surprise. I wasn't sure what to expect from him, but seeing Gobta fusing with a Tempest Star Wolf and tapping into that kind of power was far beyond anything I could have imagined. While he ultimately lost to Masayuki, the fact that he made it to the finals was impressive. Gobta's face flushed slightly at my words, a mixture of pride and embarrassment flickering in his expression. But I lost. Not only that, the way I lost was ridiculous, he yelled, frustration spilling out of him. I could understand where he was coming from. Masayuki had barely made a move during their fight, yet he emerged victorious with what seemed like effortless ease. In terms of raw power and skill, Gobta had the upper hand. But facing someone with Masayuki's unique skill, Chosen One, was an entirely different and inherently unfair game. Ha. But you made it to the finals, though. That's still incredible. Did Rimuru-san give you something as a reward for placing that high? I asked, genuinely curious about what he had received. At the mention of Rimuru, Gobta's eyes lit up with excitement. Yes, he gave me a cool new scabbard. I can now fire off more than one, Black Thunder, from it. But I still can't spam it because of the short cooldown. His voice was enthusiastic as he explained, unable to contain his pride. Now, that was something to be wary of. I remembered seeing him fire off Black Thunder from his scabbard during the tournament, but he had only managed to do it once. I had assumed he needed to recharge it manually. Hearing that his new scabbard allowed for multiple shots, even with a short cooldown, was impressive and slightly terrifying. The potential for Gobta to unleash that power repeatedly could change the tide of any battle he faced. After things calmed down, I turned beside me to face my secretary, Kigali. She wore a calm smile while listening to our conversation, her demeanor poised and collected. I appreciated her presence and wanted her to join our discussion, so I decided to ask her something. What was the most notable event during the founding festival for you, Kigali? I inquired, curious to hear her perspective. She placed her hand thoughtfully on her chin, contemplating her answer. That's a difficult question to answer. Plenty of incredible events took place during the festival. If I had to pick one, it would definitely be the battle between the Destroyer and the Frost Dragon, she answered earnestly. As soon as she mentioned the battle, a palpable shift occurred in the atmosphere. The lightness of our earlier conversation faded, replaced by a weighty recognition of the significance behind her words. It wasn't that she had said anything wrong. Instead, the gravity of that battle left an indelible mark on all of us. When I first arrived here, I had set my sights on rising to the top in power and influence, determined to reshape this world to align with my vision. I learned about those who stood at the pinnacle of power in my journey. While I knew their names, I never truly comprehended the extent of their strength. I had naively thought I could reach their level within a reasonable time frame. However, witnessing the clash between Milim and Velzard shattered that illusion completely. Their battle wasn't just a contest of strength. No, it was a cataclysmic event that threatened to devastate entire continents. To call it a battle of gods wouldn't just be hyperbole. In fact, it would be an understatement. The sheer force of their clash sent shockwaves that reverberated through the very fabric of the world. Even my anti-skill would have been rendered useless in the face of such overwhelming power. Had it not been for the protective barrier in place, the shockwaves alone could have annihilated me and everyone else present, leaving nothing but devastation in their wake. The very mention of the frost dragon now served as a grim reminder of the precarious nature of power. Velzard's decision to align herself with Rimuru changed everything. It wasn't just me who recognized the implications. Those nations in the West who had remained neutral or antagonistic toward Tempest began to step back. News of Velzard siding with Rimuru spread like wildfire, igniting fears and concerns among leaders. Rimuru's nation was already teetering on the brink of superpower status. And now, with the Storm Dragon at his side and the Frost Dragon joining forces with him, it was clear that Tempest was no longer a fledgling power. They had become the world's strongest nation, an entity that commanded respect and fear. The presence of two true dragons at Rimuru's side halted any ambitions I might have entertained. I could no longer afford to act aggressively, as any moves I made could easily provoke a catastrophic response. I decided to lay incredibly low in light of this overwhelming power dynamic. The world was shifting beneath our feet, and I needed to navigate these turbulent times cautiously. The reality was stark, and any attempts to undermine Rimuru or challenge his growing influence could spell disaster, not just for me but for any nation foolish enough to underestimate the might of the dragons now allied with him. After what felt like an eternity, Sue finally broke the silence. The battle between Milim-sama and Velzard-sama was an unplanned event. Even we were surprised that Rimuru-sama allowed it to happen. As for me, I certainly consider myself lucky to have witnessed it. His casual tone contrasted with the weight of his words, but the gravity of the event was still palpable in the air. I knew most people felt lucky to have witnessed such an extraordinary clash. It was a truly epic spectacle that revealed the true power limit of this world. Seeing it firsthand made me rethink my plans and consider the consequences before making any drastic moves. Milim-sama and Velzard-sama are terrifying, Gobta commented, visibly shuddering at the thought. In stark contrast to the serious mood surrounding us, Xian's expression shifted back to her usual joyful self as she turned to look at Gobta. "I know, that's what made the fight so incredible in the first place," she exclaimed, her excitement bubbling over. Gobta and Sue sighed in unison at her exuberance, while I couldn't help but laugh awkwardly at their dynamic. Despite the earlier tension, their camaraderie offered a brief moment of levity. Third-person POV the expedition crew pressed onward on their journey to Jistav, the distant city looming on the horizon. For the most part, the journey was peaceful, with only a handful of mindless monsters crossing their path. Each encounter was swiftly dealt with, a testament to the crew's prowess. They moved with purpose, the atmosphere punctuated by the rhythmic creaking of the carriages and the occasional laughter from the riders. Inside Yuki's carriage, he and his companions engaged in light conversation, trying to ease the mundanity of travel. They exchanged stories, shared jokes, and marveled at the scenery, finding solace in each other's company as the landscape shifted from rolling hills to dense forests. While Rimuru's subordinates appeared at ease, they remained vigilant. Gobta, with his carefree attitude, was the only one who truly eased up, laughing heartily at jokes and enjoying the ride. In contrast, Sue mainly remained quiet, embodying the stoic presence he was known for, his eyes scanning the surroundings for any potential threats. Always a lively spirit, Xian engaged in animated discussions with the group. As night fell, the crew would stop at a safe location to make camp for the night. Xian, Sue, and Gobta, being monsters who required no sleep, remained awake while Yuki, Kigali, and the rest of the crew drifted off to rest. The trio would gather around a small fire, engaging in private conversations that blended strategic planning with casual banter, all while communicating back to Rimuru through thought communication. Their discussions ranged from the day's events to reflections on the journey ahead, always mindful of their leader's interests. Throughout the journey, Yuki was consumed by thoughts of Rimuru's whereabouts. He couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty, wondering if he had already arrived at their destination ahead of them. The questions gnawed at him, leaving him restless even in sleep. Unbeknownst to Yuki and Kigali, Rimuru and Velzard were off exploring the world, enjoying the sights and sounds that unfolded around them. With plenty of time before the crew would reach Jistav, they ventured into uncharted territories. Their absence from the expedition added a layer of complexity to Yuki's thoughts, as he remained unaware of the true nature of his journey and the potential occurrences happening far from his sight. Flashback to Rimuru and Velzard's arrival at Milim's domain. Rimuru and Velzard arrived at their first destination far faster than anticipated. The frost dragon currently hovered a few tens of meters above the ground, her presence commanding and majestic. In front of her, Milim floated with an excited grin, her enthusiasm radiating like a beacon. Rimuru sat atop Velzard, feeling a wave of confusion wash over him. He glanced between Milim and Velzard, perplexed by Milim's lack of surprise at their sudden arrival. Given the speed of their journey, he half expected her to be taken aback, but instead, she seemed unfazed, her excitement unwavering. Milim's relaxed demeanor contrasted sharply with his own apprehension about the situation, leaving him to wonder if she had known they were coming all along. Rimuru's Pav, did Milim know we were going here? I guess that's to be expected from her. She could have also sensed us despite the fact I concealed us. Now that we were at our first destination, I stood up, feeling the rush of air around me. Balancing on Velzard's back while she hovered a few tens of meters above the ground was no easy feat. Even though her wings flapped with elegance and grace, the sheer power they generated almost threw me off balance, sending a thrill through me. Wahahaha! What are you doing here, Auntie Velzard and Rimuru? Are you here for round 2? Milim asked, a hint of excitement lacing her voice. God no! Those two fought once, and it was a nightmare to contain. I'm not about to let it happen again. No, we're here to remind you about that expedition in Jistav. I refuted her instantly. My voice was almost lost in the winds generated by Velzard's mighty wings, but I shouted anyway. The thought of a rematch between them sent a chill down my spine. I wanted to avoid that chaos at all costs. Fu tilde not at all, Milim-chan. As Rimu-kun said, we're here to let you know that the expedition is underway, Velzard added. Her voice reverberated powerfully, almost as if she were projecting her thoughts directly into our minds despite her mouth remaining still. Feeling her presence echo in my head was a strange sensation. Immediately upon hearing her words, Milim's eyes sparkled with excitement, mirroring the wide-eyed wonder of a child who had just been told they were going to Disneyland or something equally thrilling. Oh, it's happening already? Milim exclaimed, her enthusiasm palpable. With a light jump, I leapt off Velzard's back, landing a few dozen meters away on solid ground. Milim shortly followed, still brimming with energy. The force of the winds from Velzard's movement dug into my skin, but the sensation was bearable. It reminded me of the immense power constantly in motion above me. I looked up at her and waved, and she nodded her enormous head in acknowledgement. It was hard to tell because of her blood-red fangs, but it seemed like she was smiling, not menacingly, but warmly. I suppose I should transform back into my human form, Velzard said, and I nodded. As her words faded, Velzard's body began glowing a bright blue, her scales shimmering as they reflected the light. The glow expanded, enveloping her form until she became a silhouette of pure light. This reversion had the opposite effect in stark contrast to her earlier transformation, which had released an immense amount of aura that almost overwhelmed me. With the radiant light shrinking in size, all the aura around her was drawn inward with great force, creating an almost magnetic pull that made me feel like I was being drawn closer. I stood my ground, focused and determined, while Milim simply gazed at the transformation with an excited grin, seemingly unaffected by the powerful aura swirling around us. After a few moments, the light diminished, shrinking from its immense size to resemble Velzard's human form. In the next instant, the brilliance faded away, and she gracefully landed on the ground. Her appearance was elegant and regal, a stark reminder of the overwhelming power she possessed even in this form. Velzard walked over to us with a grace that defied the sheer speed we had just traveled. It was almost surreal how, despite crossing nearly 1,000 kilometers in mere minutes, she appeared as if she had simply been taking a leisurely stroll. Well, aren't you going to welcome us into your home? She asked her niece, teasingly breaking the brief silence. Milim, who had been brimming with excitement only moments ago, suddenly looked flustered at her aunt's remark. Her cheeks flushed slightly as the realization hit her. Wait, let me inform the others first. I'll have them meet you at the entrance. She stammered, clearly trying to regain her composure, though the embarrassment was evident in her hurried response. Velzard and I exchanged amused glances, chuckling as Milim hastily darted back into her domain. She had that familiar energy, always ready for a fight or a challenge, but when it came to things like hospitality, she still had a lot to learn. We began strolling toward the grand entrance of the carved mountain, the towering stone doorway looking as imposing as ever. As we moved, Velzard broke the comfortable silence between us. While she isn't there yet, Milim has the potential to become a great ruler, she said. Her comment caught me off guard. Milim? A great ruler? That was a stretch, to put it lightly. Are you sure you aren't giving her too much credit? I replied, half joking but genuinely curious. Velzard chuckled, her eyes glimmering with the kind of wisdom that only millennia of life could bring. Having potential is entirely different from being competent. Milim could become a reliable ruler, but as she is now, it'll be difficult. But she'll have to shape up, considering she has such a vast territory to rule over, she explained. She had a point. With Carrion and Frey now under Milim's rule, their territories had merged with hers, expanding her dominion significantly. Add the entirety of JackDaWeb, and it was almost comparable to my own territory in size. Managing something of that magnitude wouldn't be a walk in the park. I agree. Frey's doing her best to help Milim act like a proper ruler, but she's still got a long way to go, I said, nodding as I thought about the countless challenges Milim would face in the future. Velzard nodded in response, her expression thoughtful. We continued our walk toward the entrance, chatting lightly about our journey. I couldn't help but recall the breathtaking views we had witnessed, so I found myself excitedly describing the vivid landscapes we flew past. Velzard listened quietly, smiling every now and then, indulging me as I recounted each detail. Before long, the enormous stone doors of the mountain swung open with a low groan, revealing a group of 5 people standing just beyond the threshold. Leading the group, of course, was Milim, her signature grin now replaced with a calmer and more dignified smile. Behind her stood Carrion, Frey, Midray, and Hermes, each of them exuding a serene yet formidable presence. As our groups neared each other, they bowed respectfully, with the exception of Milim. Velzard and I returned their gestures with a nod of acknowledgement. Greetings, Velzard-sama, Rimuru dono. The 4 of them said in unison, their voices carrying an air of formality. I couldn't help but feel a little awkward at the display of respect. I wasn't uncomfortable with it, but I was still getting used to being treated like this. Still, I decided to just go with the flow and not make a fuss. Thank you for your welcome. I apologize for our sudden visit, I said with a light bow. It is no problem, Rimuru dono. We are honored to have you 2 here, Frey responded, maintaining her ever-formal tone. We came here to inform Milim that the expedition to JackDaWeb is currently underway. While the rest of the team was heading there by wagon, we decided to go off alone. But we would have most likely gotten there way before they did, so we chose to take a bit of a detour, I explained. I see. Ha ha ha. It was a bit alarming when Milim-sama informed us that you 2 were approaching. I looked ahead only to see Velzard-sama's dragon form speeding toward us. It was quite the sight. Midray replied with a hearty laugh, lightening the mood and prompting a few chuckles from the rest of us. His remark made me pause, realizing just how terrifying the sight of Velzard's massive dragon form must have been for them. I'm sure Milim reassured them that it was nothing to worry about, but even I would have been a bit anxious if I were in their position. Indeed. Hey, let's continue this conversation inside. We can't have our guests just standing around outside, after all, Carrion suggested. The rest of us nodded in agreement. We went through the massive stone doorway and into the mountain's interior. The sheer grandeur of the space left me momentarily speechless. The inside of the mountain wasn't just a cave. It was a vast, intricately carved domain that housed the royalty of the Dragon Faithful. The main hall we stepped into was enormous, with towering ceilings and wide corridors that branched off into what seemed like other sections of the structure. Magical torches lined the walls, casting a soft, warm glow over the area, while chandeliers made from enchanted crystals hung from the ceiling, illuminating the space in a calming light. The walls were adorned with colossal cave paintings depicting an epic battle between Milim and Guy Crimson, adding a historical weight to the already impressive surroundings. As Velzard and I walked further in, we couldn't help but marvel at the sheer scale of the place. Despite the ancient appearance of the carvings and the stone structures, it had a certain elegance. The whole interior felt like a grand palace hidden within a mountain, reminding me that we were inside something much larger than it appeared from the outside. Quite the place Milim's built here, I muttered to myself, admiring the effort that must have gone into constructing such a vast and beautiful space. Milim's subordinates halted their steps, allowing Velzard and me to take in the full grandeur of the mountain's interior. While I was still marveling at the scale of the space, I noticed something unusual. Velzard's attention was fixated entirely on one of the massive cave paintings. Her usual calm and composed demeanor was replaced by something more complex, a subtle mixture of frustration and regret. Her expression was hard to read, but the weight of her emotions was undeniable. Concerned, I moved closer and gently placed my hand on her shoulder. "Is something wrong, Vels-chan?" I asked softly, hoping to offer some comfort. She turned her head toward me, her lips curving into a soft smile, but it was clear that something was on her mind. She shook her head lightly as if to brush off whatever was bothering her. "It's nothing, Rimuru-kun. It's just, that painting reminded me of that day," she said, her voice tinged with a somber undertone as her gaze drifted back to the mural. I followed her gaze and suddenly understood. The painting depicts the day Milim lost control after the tragic death of her family. In her blind rage, Milim had almost destroyed the world, and Guy Crimson had intervened, stopping her from unleashing her full destructive power. Velzard wasn't there that day. She had secluded herself, overwhelmed by the grief of losing her elder brother. While she was grieving in isolation, Milim descended into chaos. That moment in history wasn't just about the loss for her. It was also a reminder that she hadn't been there when her niece needed her the most. The frustration on her face wasn't only from her absence, though. She was likely angry that it wasn't her who pulled Milim back from the brink. I watched her closely, sensing the depth of her emotions. She remained silent for a moment longer before finally tearing her gaze away from the painting. She turned to face me, placing her hand on my shoulder, mirroring the gesture I'd made earlier. "Don't worry, I'm all right," she assured me, though her voice hinted at a lingering bitterness. "Although, it does irritate me to see that damn demon," she muttered with barely restrained malice, almost under her breath. Demon? Did she mean Guy Crimson? The tension in her voice when she referred to him was unmistakable. I had always assumed that Velzard and Guy were on decent terms. After all, didn't she reside in the ice continent with him before eventually moving to Tempest? I couldn't help but wonder why she would dislike him. Sorry if this sounds rude." I paused and began carefully choosing my words. "But do you happen to hate Guy?" I continued. I wasn't sure if I had overstepped a boundary. The last thing I wanted was to offend her, especially when she seemed to be in a delicate mood. To my surprise, Velzard's melancholic expression shifted, replaced by a look of confusion. She tilted her head to the side as if my question puzzled her. Then, to my even greater surprise, she started chuckling. At first, it was a light laugh, barely audible, but it quickly grew as she brought a hand to her mouth, trying to stifle her amusement. Her laughter wasn't loud or overbearing. It was soft, cute, even. But I was utterly bewildered. What had I said that was so funny? I could feel the eyes of Milim's subordinates on us, likely as confused as I was by the sudden shift in mood. After a few moments, Velzard finally composed herself, her usual grace returning. Her warm smile contrasted with the frosty aura she normally exuded. "I'm sorry, Rimuru-kun," she said, still smiling. "I thought I'd made it obvious, but I guess I've been living in my head too much lately. To answer your question, yes, I do resent him," she responded casually, as if she had just commented about the weather. "What?"